Hey everyone, and welcome to the August edition of 3030. I am Pat Reinhardt from Conductor. Thank you so much for joining me for 30 minutes and giving me 30 minutes of your very valuable time. I always appreciate it. What are we going to be talking about today? Got a few topics that have been going on, even though August is typically a slower month. As we've all noticed, Google has pretty much gotten on a cadence of throwing a bunch of algorithm updates at us every month. That's fine. So today we're going to start off by talking about Google's link spam update and what we're seeing and hearing around the industry. A lot of people asked me about this, so I figured I would cover it. Again, the link spam stuff is nothing new necessarily, but they did announce it, so we'll go through it. Actually, the bigger one, which has happened recently in the last couple of weeks, was Google coming out with a new way to dynamically write title tags, or how they generate title tags when they don't use your HTML title tag. So that's pretty interesting, and I actually like it. I like where the direction that they're heading. So we'll go through that, give all the information on that and some details around that. We will continue to talk about the slow death of AMP, in my opinion, as Google continues to further remove the AMP label in search results, which I believe is the main benefit of it. And then ultimately we will talk about people also ask results, and that Google confirming that core updates do have a particular impact on that particular snippet, which is something I've been talking about for months. I'm not patting myself on the back, I'm just saying. So let's get into it all, because we only have 30 minutes. Number one, Google's link spam update, what we're seeing and hearing. So if everyone remembers that on July 26th, Google began to roll out the link spam update, and they announced it. And they said it would take about 2 weeks, but recently confirmed that it finished on August 24th. So that took a little bit longer, about a month, which is longer than usual. Usually it's about 10 days when one of these things rolls out, and and gets to the the final destination of it. But this one took longer than usual. That's not really a point, not just something to note. But I guess the big question I was getting, like, what was this one about? And just want to preface this by saying there's been a lot going on in the algorithm and in the industry, and it's been a lot to keep up with. So I understand that, but for the most part, this one, this algorithm update, just to read out what was from Google's official announcement, is even more effective at identifying and nullifying link spam more broadly across multiple languages. So for the most part, what this thing did was basically just add on to something that Google's algorithm has done for many, 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 many years, right? And this is using machine learning and AI to identify spammy link practices and spammy links pointing to your site, and just around the net in multiple languages in general. And this was just an enhancement to it. And of course, the big question is, any measurable movement from this. So typically, and I mentioned this last time on the program, typically things like this, when it comes to like link spam and things that basically would have been associated to like older updates, like the Penguin update, for example. For the most part, these are things that are just happening all the time, right? They're constantly updating things. My guess is the reason they announced this was because it was a larger update than normal. But believe me, they are constantly updating the algorithm to look for things like this. So this isn't something that like came out of nowhere, it was probably just a larger update to that part of the algorithm than normal, as much to the point that they announced it. I went through a couple of hundred accounts here at Conductor and looked at a lot of our overarching market accounts and things of that nature. And honestly, I didn't see anything, at least nothing that I would associate to this particular update. Again, a lot of stuff has been rolling out, and there's a lot of movement up and down. Of course, during this time period, this title tag thing started to happen as well, which we'll get into next. But for the most part, I was never anticipating finding any measurable, impact from an update like this. But for the most part, what's worth noting, if you saw a shift, like an unnatural shift, I would say, between July 26th and August 24th, this may have something to do with it. If you have an active link building program going on, maybe this had something to do with that dip or that enhancement. I have no idea. I would only imagine we would see a dip here because they would be marking links as spammy and taking them away from pointing to your site. But for the most part, from Conductor's data and from Conductor's side, I could not find anything. I just couldn't find anything. I went through like 150 accounts, and I couldn't find anything that was noteworthy or that I felt was from this particular update. So I would imagine that most of you probably didn't see anything either. I asked a lot of people around the industry. No one really saw anything. So I think for the most part, this one was just kind of a bigger update to something that they do more, very often. So just wanted to cover that. But the big thing actually that's happened, which is something I'm actually pretty happy about, is that Google has found a new way of writing title tags, and I actually like it. Now, just for some background here, since like 2012, Google has taken title tags, your HTML title tags that you write, and about 20-ish% of the time, they have, instead of using the HTML title tag that you have, they have dynamically rewritten that based on other content on your site that better matches the user's query, right? So that's what this is about. And honestly, from my perspective, every time that I had title tags that were being rewritten, they were straight up trash. I never liked this practice. I don't like when Google, becomes very helpful and, writes stuff for me. I think I got a handle on writing title tags and things of that nature. I think a lot of you probably feel the same way, but that is what's happened. But on August 17th, folks started to notice that Google was rewriting title tags in a different way, particularly that they were using heading tags, H1s and H2s to be exact, right? And that was pretty interesting because that is a change, right? And ultimately, you started to see people, kind of tweet about it. I was actually on vacation last week, and being the nerd that I am, I was, scrolling Twitter, late at night, and actually saw that Lily Ray had posted something about this, asking, "Hey, is anyone else seeing this?" And I guess a lot of people started to talk about it, and threads opened up, and it looked like Google was in fact using H1s and H2s as title tags, and instead of using the query. And dynamically creating a trash title tag, based on the query, which again, I don't like dynamically created stuff like that. It never works. It never looks good. It never sounds right. It never really is positioned the way that you want it to be. And ultimately just found that 15 to 20% of the time, the control was taken out of my hands, right? Now, what's different about this, again, is that Google, since 2012, this has been happening for a really long time. They base it around the query, right? Basically when someone puts something in the search bar, if they don't believe that your title tag matches up to that query or the intent of that query, they will go and they will take content randomly from wherever on your site, and they will create a title tag that, again, in my opinion, was 99% trash. But from here, this is okay, they're still rewriting the title tag, right? So Pat, is this a good or a bad thing? And this was the main question. Should I do anything different? Is there something different to be done here? To me, I'm actually happy with this. I think this is a great thing because I think that us as folks who are in charge or oversee SEO, I think that this puts a lot more power in our control, right, of what shows up in the SERPs, because most of the time your title tag, and let's say your H1 tag, they're most likely pretty similar, right? I mean, 9 out of 10 times they're more than likely pretty similar, have the same, kind of core keyword focus. And so that to me, I'm like, hey, listen, if Google used an H1 or an H2 on my page versus using a, dynamically creating some garbage title tag, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I would much rather, because that makes me feel like I'm in more control, right? And for years, I've had really great conversations, arguments, strong conversations where Twitter backs and forths about heading tags, and a lot of people think, well, heading tags don't really matter as far as weighting from a ranking perspective and things of that nature. And I've always felt that an H1, it's the multiple H1 argument, right? Should you have more? Is it okay to have multiple H1s? Technically, yes, it's okay to have multiple H1s, but I always look at a page like I look at a newspaper article or a magazine article, right? And the H1 is the headline. And that headline there should only be one headline, then you have subheadlines. If you have several headlines, then which tag should they weight more, right? And again, that's just my thinking and always been my thinking. So in my opinion, this actually puts more weight on the heading tags, but also puts more control in our hands on what shows up in the SERPs in that 15 to 20% time that Google does rewrite. Now, some more details around this, just like other takeaways, is that title tags are still an important factor. This was another question that came up a lot. Like, does this mean that title tags are not as important anymore? Are they, since they're not dynamically generating them, or because they're pulling from different areas of the site or different areas of your page, does this make them less important? The answer, of course, is no. Title tags are still very important. And Google came out to say that, they will still continue to use your HTML, like the title tags that you create, more than 80% of the time. So this entire discussion I've been saying about 15 to 20% of the time this was happening, that is still the case. So the title tag that you put on the page is, still using, the HTML will continue to be used 80% of the time. So the next one is headers have grown in importance with this change, in my opinion. To make sure your H1s and your H1s and your H2s are well written. So that's another thing. A lot of the times people, not that people have ignored heading tags, don't get me wrong, but I think that, from like a keyword, perspective, and just, overarching, when you're crafting your heading tags, keep in mind that 15% of the 20% of the time that they might wind up as your title tag. So kind of think through that. Think about what's happening there, and think about how would you craft it differently knowing that? I probably would. Again, knowing that, I've always felt this way, so I've always crafted them in this way. But at the end of the day, think about that while you're going through and crafting your heading tags, right? I think that this will help titles become better overall, right? Because we are creating them, people are creating them, and we're not having dynamically created, title tags, which, again, my personal opinion, are usually straight up trash. And, they don't usually look that good. They don't have a good message. They're not enticing. And again, we spend time on this. We spend time crafting these things for a reason. This isn't something that we, kind of do haphazardly. Like, we take time to do the keyword research, to craft the title tags, craft the heading tags, to make sure that when someone sees us in the SERP, that we have the best possible chance of them clicking on us, right? We should control that message most of the time, which we have. Don't get me wrong, we have. But in that 15 to 20% time, which is a lot, don't get me wrong, and mostly on more than likely very, very long tail keywords, which, as we all know, the more specific you get, the closer you are to someone buying or using your service. I feel more comfortable that we have more control here. So that I believe that title tags will be better. And it sounds like from the post, which when we send the deck around, on Google's Webmaster blog, you can go and read the full one pager. It's a super quick read, but very informative. In the developers blog, that they are saying that it looks like titles have become better, and which means that they're getting more engagement off of the title tags that are being created by humans and not ones by them and by the algorithm. So, which again, to me, makes total sense. But at the end of the day, something to consider while you're, other takeaways from this. And then the last part, of course, any potential headaches here. And, for the most part, yes, of course, there's potential headaches here. Look at this picture to the right that I've had up the entire time. So here, Jenny Hearn, who, is someone who was talking to Lily Ray. She works in medical field, and as you can see here, their flu page, the title tag changed to flu vaccinations. So the interesting part about this is that this page, from what I gathered from the conversation, is that this page is about the flu in general, and not just about flu vaccinations. So Google had taken an H2 on the page and made that the title tag, flu vaccinations, whereas this page is about the flu in general. So there's going to be some of that, right? There's going to be some of that, here. So something to take care, something to consider, to keep an eye on, the different types, like where your title tags are and what is really seeing. But at the end of the day, just make sure that be aware of how many different topics you have on a page, right? Because something like this may happen. This could happen to anybody. This isn't just about, medical. But again, this could really mess up the messaging on your site 15 to 20% of the time, where someone's looking for flu stuff in general. Like, if you were looking for general flu information, right, you probably wouldn't click on this page because you think that it's specifically about just vaccinations, but I want to see symptoms. I want to see, treatments. I want to see what should I do, things about that. And for the most part, this is saying that this page is just about flu vaccinations, which actually isn't true. If you go to the page, it's actually a entire page dedicated to the flu in general. So as this rolls out, and Google did say that they will get better, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, pay attention to your title tags, and if you see anything out there, where you think you have multiple multiple points on a page that could be their own pages, but you don't want to make them their own pages, this could happen, right? This could happen. And yes, there's a great comment here in the chat that this is a clear example of Google getting it wrong. It is 100%. So might not be such a good thing overall. But at the end of the day, definitely, good point here. That site, probably clearly wrote the title tag to be more comprehensive. I completely agree. I don't remember, I can't remember what the exact title tag was for this page, but it wasn't just flu. It had other things. So this is an example of Google not, this not being a good thing. But at the end of the day, that's what's happening with the title tag, update. Be aware of it. I think it's mostly a good thing, but be aware of it. There's and if someone is, I had another question right before this, was like, hey, how can I monitor? Okay, it is flu-NHS. Thank you. So someone called out the title tag is literally flu. So that's interesting. So I wonder why I pulled vaccinations there. So maybe just because it's too short. Interesting. Anyway, so something to keep in mind. But there is a tool. I cannot remember the tool, and I'm gonna be so upset at myself. I'll get it and I'll show it next time. Someone developed a Google Doc tool that goes out there and goes through your pages and gets the title of what Google is currently seeing. Also, if you're if you're a Conductor user, we're pulling in the title tag that is showing as well. So if you're in Conductor, you can use Conductor for this. We'll show you what the title tag is in the SERP at that time. So definitely something good to monitor on things that are different. And one other thing, there was someone who came in who I think had some technical trouble and asked a question about the heading tags. Will you have any recommendations on tips to frame our H1 and H2 after this change? Great question. I probably covered that a little bit, but specifically, it's not necessarily something different to do, right? Again, I've always tried to match the H1 to the title tag pretty closely. You want to make sure it's it's keyword rich, but also it's incentivizes people to click, that it's something that people want to click on. But I think for the most part, when you're crafting H1s, make sure it's not just a keyword, right? Depending on what the page is, of course. If it's just a straight up service or category page, like men's shoes, there's not much you can write about that in the H1. But at the end of the day, just keep in mind, what your keyword focus is for the page, right? And then, if you have a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary keyword that you're targeting for, a certain universe on a certain page, primary and secondary is always good to use in the title tag, primary and H1. And then if you have H2s, you go to the secondary keyword and then the tertiary keyword from there. But, don't overthink it, I probably think is my best tip. Just if it makes sense and the keyword's in it, it's probably going to work. So definitely just keep it simple and keep it straightforward. So at the end of the day, just something to keep in mind. This is a big update, honestly. Then it's this is a pretty big update. But another good comment here: if the meta title is that short, then it might be getting overwritten more than 20% of the time. Very good point. Google doesn't particularly like super short title tags. That usually if it's too short or too long, that's in my experience where you start to see things get rewritten both on the title tag and meta description standpoint. So it's always good to stay within character limits as well. And I know there's a lot of debate about that, but I think that you should be able to get the best foot forward is having a clear message that is that is fully being able to be fully viewed by the user. So at the end of the day, that is what's happening with the title tag. If anyone has any other questions, that's definitely definitely something to come back to. I'm going to be watching this, and I'm sure I'll have some more updates as time goes on. But this is definitely a big deal. But I think it's a positive move. But again, good example of Google getting it wrong, and there's a lot of considerations there. But at the end of the day, that's what's happening there. Moving on. So Google furthers its removal of AMP. Poor AMP. So this is something that I've been covering. I don't know. I talk about AMP probably pretty frequently on the program. I'd say it comes up 3, 4, maybe 5 times a year. which is, almost half the, program. We only do 12 a year. So at the end of the day, when the Core Web Vitals update, when the page experience update, went live, one of the portions of that was that Google was going to, that it was no longer a requirement for the top stories carousel to have it, to be an AMP page, right? That used to be the big benefit of AMP. Was on mobile, you could show up in the top stories carousel, and that was the thing, like that you have to have an AMP page for this. When the page experience update went live, one of the portions of that, and then subsequently the June update and then the July update, parts of that was starting to remove the AMP, the AMP requirement to show up here, and that is pretty much completely rolled out as far as I can say. And this was anticipated, right? Google pretty much has removed, as far as I can tell, like all the AMP label everywhere. Even within regular search, I don't see the AMP label anymore. The lightning bolt seems to be gone. But at the end of the day, the big question is, and I had a great conversation about this yesterday, was, is that it for AMP? I have someone who is just building an AMP program right now, and in my opinion, no. And I've gone back and forth on this. I don't think it's going to be the end of AMP, but it's probably not that great for its future, right? Because for me, AMP was probably the precursor to the page experience update, right? Google always does things in steps, to get you to do things, right? I always say they're a polite bully, right? And in this way, they said, hey, AMP, you'll get, if you put this on your site, it'll make it run faster. It's a better experience, right? And remember, they said that a lot about AMP. It's all about the experience, And, the more I think about it, the more I start to correlate these two things to one another. Whereas, Google probably collected a lot of data, a lot of usage data from AMP, from AMP pages, and probably used that to build, the part of the algorithm that is handling the page experience update now. And now what this looks like is like, now that is live and part of the core algorithm, it kind of feels like they're starting to peel AMP away, right? And they're just saying, like, listen, it's not really about having an AMP page. It's about having a great experience, which, again, has always kind of been the message. But I don't know, like removing AMP from the top carousel, which I thought on mobile, which I felt was like the number one reason. But at the end of the day, but still seeing AMP, that was like the big reason to use it. But for people, like the adoption will probably start to head in the wrong direction here, because it's like, okay, like AMP pages work in, when they're necessary, when they make sense. But at the end of the day, and to someone's comment, yes, very much, even though, and I just want to be very clear about this, even though the label is removed, AMP pages are still showing up in the SERPs. And I think that was a little bit of confusion that some folks had, was, if the label is gone, does that mean the page is gone? It's just showing the regular page. And so no, that's not the case. And someone had just said, hey, AMP label removed, but still seeing AMP version of the page in top stories majority of the time. And that's really the point, is that they are still AMP pages, but they don't have the little lightning bolt on it anymore. So it kind of comes down to what we have to watch over time, is saying that, because I see a lot of regular pages in the top carousel still, and will that number go down? Will we start to just see regular pages, and all of a sudden AMP pages start to just slowly decline, right? And yep, there it is. And I was waiting for someone to say it. Is it too early to say AMP is dead? More than likely, yes. It's definitely too soon to say that. And also, if you are using AMP, this is not me saying get rid of your AMP pages. Don't go forward with AMP. There's literally no harm to having AMP pages, as long as they work well and it makes sense for the type of content that you're doing. There's a lot of benefits to AMP. But at the end of the day, my thing was, if I'm going to install AMP, I'm going to get into the top carousel, and I'm going to get a visual, a visual benefit with that little lightning bolt, which does catch your eye. Well, which did, past tense, does catch your eye. But I would not be surprised if in a couple of years, I'm sitting here talking about, with AMP, much like Flash and all the other stuff that we've said goodbye to, with a tombstone slide here with AMP on it. I feel like we're heading in that direction. But I guess at the end of the day, we'll see what happens, right? So moving on. And so lastly, but certainly not leastly, which is not a word, Google confirms that core updates impact people also ask results. And I told everyone this. I said this, and it's also not a surprise because obvious, Google core updates impacts everything. But at the end of the day, most of my examples around these core updates have been around people also ask, and I've had a fascination with this, right? So in a Webmaster Chat, Google, John Mueller was asked to confirm that core updates trigger people also ask girls to show up more or less frequently, right? And basically what he said, and I will read this verbatim just because he said it, I think it makes sense to read it verbatim. I don't think it's per industry, but what usually happens with these kind of elements in search results is that we try to figure out what is the most appropriate thing to show there. And with a core update, that does change some things within our core algorithms, and it can result in a different mix of elements that we show in the search results, right? Sometimes that is what people also ask. Sometimes that is with regards to featured snippets and rich results. These things essentially are all kind of tied into core algorithm that we have. So it'd be normal to see some fluctuations there. Yes, that is confirmations, right? And of course, I was talking to someone internally yesterday, and basically they hysterically said, so core updates make things go up and down. It's like, yes, they make things go up and down. But I have noticed over all of these core updates, the thing that has moved the most is people also ask. Like in all different verticals and all different types of businesses, it was always people also asked that had the most movement that showed up, and it's always at a greater rate. And so there was some validation here because I've been asking a lot of people, hey, are you seeing this? Hey, are you seeing this? I talk about it on the program all the time. Like, hey, is anyone else seeing this? And I get a lot of back and forth, right? And I think at the end of the day that, this is a little bit of validation for me anyway, or at least makes me feel better. But just to take a slide from my last 30/30, you can see here that, and I've showed like 5 or 6 slides. I went back through the last year and I've shown about 5 or 6 slides like this, where just massive changes in people also ask, and no other rich snippets like this, like hundreds and sometimes thousands of people also ask results moving around in all different types of verticals. So I believe that core algorithm does impact PAA more than any other. That's just, my opinion, but that is just something that I've seen. But it is good to see that, Google confirming that. But of course, the argument could be made that, well, also other, result types go up and down. And that's totally true. But it's more the velocity, I guess, that I'm talking about here. And usually the people also ask, I see a higher velocity or a greater rate of change within that particular result, right? A couple of things here. Any updates on Apple's search engine coming into the search space? Thank you. Great question. No, I've not heard anything about that. That's actually been very quiet. I was talking to my buddy Stefan Bajaya, who many of you know, about this the other day, and we actually haven't heard any news on it. I'm gonna keep looking into that, but as soon as I hear anything, I'll certainly be reporting it here. Another comment. I've always worried that AMP is going to be a negative impact on my website since it generates a google.com link. That's fair. Although I think they updated that where it's not a Google link anymore. I think they do have the direct link to the AMP page now, because a lot of people were complaining about that like a year ago. It was more than a year ago. But I think they did update that because it's not a google.com link anymore. But anyway, that's something that we can talk about another time as we are heading to time. So last month, I had told you that it was time for an update in our cover slide, in our look and feel. I was about to push send on the poll out on LinkedIn, and then I recognized it was August. And there was a lot of people on vacation and there weren't a lot of people around. So I decided to do this in September, after my kids go back to school. So we will do this poll in September for the new look and feel of 30/30. I welcome all of you and would thank you in advance for helping me decide which one I will use. And then I'm going to see how long it takes for others, especially Seth, to notice what cover photo I use. But we will do that in September. So apologies that we didn't get that out. And with that, the last thing, we've talked a lot about algorithms today, everybody, but remember, we're not chasing algorithms, we live with them, right? And the most important algorithm is the heart and mind of your customer. And if you make great content that your customers care about and love, then they will continue to come back to continue to focus on that. And with that, everyone, I hope you have a great end to the summer. I'm sure there's people all over the country here and all over the world. And I know that school has started for many of you. My kids start school next week. Watson has grown to a healthy 47 pounds already. So that happened a lot quicker than I anticipated. But him and I are going to hang out by the pool the rest of the next couple of weeks while it's still warm out. And at the end of the day, thank you all so much for joining me. As I said, this is my favorite part of my job, and I would not be able to do it without you. Thank you for spending 30 minutes of your very valuable time with me, and we will see you next month.